Hi everybody, I'm Scott Kelby and welcome to Photo Recipes Live Behind the Scenes. We're here in New York City in a very cool studio where we're going to bring to life some of the most popular requested photo setups from volumes 1, 2, and 3 of my books, the Digital Photography book. The reason why we decided to do this class was those sections in the back of each book, the Photo Recipes chapter, are the most popular of all. I get more comments and requests about those things. People said, I want more, I want a whole book of it. Because what those are is we take a photograph and then I describe how it was shot. Well, imagine being able to actually see how it was shot, and that's what we're going to do here in this New York studio. We're actually going to recreate some of the exact things that you saw in the book, but we're also going to take things a step further and show you some other recipes and things that didn't make it into the book. Now, we'll be able to do a lot here in the studio, but at the same time, there's going to be certain things we won't be able to do. Obviously, we can't be shooting out on location in Montana to show you how to do that landscape, but we brought the gear that you'll need to know. I'll show you how to do it here in the studio, so you'll see exactly what to do when you're out on location, some fabulous landscape, and exactly what you need to do to shoot it. All right, so we've got so much to cover today. Let's get right to it. All right, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to recreate one of the shots that was used as a chapter intro in volume 2 of the Digital Photography book, and it is a window light portrait. Now, window light portraits are great because, well, you already have the light. We're going to use a north-facing window here, and you're going to get the best light traditionally from a north-facing window. So if you have a north-facing window in your house, you're already set because you're already going to have beautiful light coming in. Now, we're going to have a couple of things to deal with. The main thing we're going to have to deal with is the harshness of the light. Depending on what type of the day you do this, it could be a lot of direct streaming light coming straight in. So what we're going to use is we're going to use this. This is a diffuser. This thing makes a huge difference. Now, the one I'm using here actually happens to be called a Last Light. It's like a tri-grip diffuser, and what it does is it just softens daylight. So you can take this right out in the middle of a street and do a street shot using nothing but this, and it will just soften and diffuse the light. This is what's called a one-stop diffuser. So if you're looking to buy one of these, and by the way, it doesn't have to have this handle, I just like this, the one made by Last Light, which is this one. I like it because you can hold the camera in one hand and then use the diffuser in the other to you know, kind of cover two birds with one stone. But they make them without this. You can get them from any kind of, Westcott makes them, a lot of different companies make them. But anyway, what it's going to do is you're going to put it between your subject and the light coming in, and it's going to soften and spread the light and make it even softer, because that's what's going to be your big challenge, is making the light coming from the window soft. Now, depending on how dirty your windows are, if your windows are dirty, believe it or not, that helps soften the light. So there are other things that you can do. We'll talk about those in a moment, but this is going to be our main tool for this entire shoot, is just having you or somebody else. In my case, we're going to have my assistant Brad here on the set in just a moment, and he's going to actually hold this up to diffuse the light used on our model. Now, we're very fortunate for this shoot today is that I was able to actually get the same male and female models that I used in volume 2, which was all based on studio lighting, to be here for this series today. So we're going to bring in our model here in just a moment. But first I want to talk about where do you position the model when they come in. Well, first we have this chair. So what you want to do is you want to position your model kind of ideally maybe 6 feet from the window. You don't want them too close to the window because the light at the closest of the window is going to be the harshest. So you want to move them away. So putting them about 6 feet away is kind of an ideal position. Also, if you don't have a diffuser or you're worried about even softer light, if you really, really want softer light, let's say that you're doing a portrait of a mother and child and you want really just beautiful soft wrapping light, in that case the ideal situation is to be able to move just behind the end of the window. Now we have a wall here, so we're kind of constricted in what we can do, but ideally what you would do is you would place the model maybe just behind the window, just kind of a little bit back in this corner, so that the softer you are from the center of the light coming in, the softer the light's going to be. So just getting a little bit further behind it's going to be great. In this case, we're going to recreate that first shot, so we're going to bring in our model. This is Shay, and she's going to be helping us on the set today. Now, my camera position is going to be over there. Hi, Shay.
Hi.
All right, so she's actually going to be facing the camera over that way, and we're going to set up there in just a moment. And then I'm going to bring Brad Moore, who's my assistant, in. Brad is going to actually diffuse the light by putting this diffuser between the daylight and the window. So here comes Brad now. This is Brad Moore. Hey, Brad. And we're just going to have him and show him where. Well, I'm going to get off the set so we have more room here. What we're going to do is we'll go ahead and set up. I'll let Brad get in position. But what we're going to do is put something between the natural light and the model just to soften it. And I'm going to head right back over there. All right, a couple of tips on how to shoot this. I'm shooting this on a tripod because we're working in natural light, and we don't have a tremendous amount of natural light, so I'm working on a tripod, but you don't necessarily have to. One thing that you would want to do, because she's seated, if you shoot it from a standing angle, so you're shooting it up high, you're going to have a very average perspective, because that's how anybody walking into this room would look and see the shot. You're shooting from up this high. So ideally, you would drop the tripod down, shoot from one knee, you're going to get a much better straight-on perspective. That's number one. Number two is, ideally, I want to separate her from the background. There's a lot of things happening behind her. I want her to stand out. So one of the tricks to do that is to shoot wide open. Use the lowest number f-stop you can on your lens. In this case, we're using a 70 to 200. I prefer to shoot further away from the subject, and I like to shoot with long lenses like this because it gives a real nice compression. If you read Volume 2, we talked about that. And in Volume 3, I have a whole chapter on lenses. We talk about all that junk, so I'm not going to go into it here. But I do prefer to shoot at the long end of the range. So a lot of times I'll be shooting in more like the 200 millimeter range for portraits than I would something shorter or wider. But again, I'm shooting at f2.8. What that's going to do, it's going to put her in focus and the background quite a bit out of focus. Now, the other thing that you have to do is you kind of have to make sure that you zoom in enough to where the subject kind of fills the frame. One of the mistakes that I talked about in Volume 1 that a lot of amateurs make is they leave way too much headroom above the subject. So if this was the subject's head, they leave a big gap up here like this. You want your subject to pretty much fill the frame. And by the way, it's perfectly okay to actually cut off a little of the subject's head. If you look in commercial photography, ads in magazines, the next time you pick up a magazine, look, and you'll see that again and again and again with the subject's head cut off. You will rarely see their chin cut off, but you'll see their head cut off. They're just the top of it, just the hair. Quite often it's very, very popular because they're trying to fill the frame and get a lot of impact. So here's what we're going to do. We've got the subject in place. We've got Brad there with the diffuser. We're going to have Brad put the diffuser in place. I'm going to get down on one knee. We're just going to take a few test shots and see how it looks. So let's go ahead and do that. All right. And yeah, just a little bit of a smile just like that. All right. So I'm taking a look at the first one. Yeah, I can tell you what. The light looks nice and wrapping coming off the image. The white balance probably needs a little bit of tweaking, but other than that, there's not a whole lot to do, and this is why people love shooting natural light so much, because really it's pretty easy. The whole trick to this thing is Brad holding that diffuser, because that's what's going to make the light wrapping. Also, you want to be able to get the diffuser kind of close to your subject too. Of course, unless you need to use more light, then you can get back a little bit with it. But if you don't have a Brad, by the way, I highly recommend a Brad. But if you don't have a Brad, you can also use a light stand to do the same thing. They make light stands with a little boom arm and two clips, so you can just position the diffuser exactly where you want it. Once you have one of those boom arms, it really makes it easy, because if you're shooting by yourself, then you can do this exact same thing. So that's pretty much it. I know you think, well, there's got to be more to it. There's really not. The only one thing that you have to keep an eye out for inside the camera is to make sure that you don't clip the highlights, that it doesn't get so bright that her face starts to get little highlights and things that you don't want. The way to do that is turn the highlight warning on in your camera. All right? Go into your camera's menu and turn the highlight warning on. What that means is when I take the shot, if any part of the photo is getting so bright that it will actually turn white and there's no detail, that's the one thing you want to fix in the camera. You don't want to try to fix that later in something like Photoshop. You may not be able to, because if the detail's gone forever, it may just be gone forever. So here's what I do. Turn your highlight warning on. Take a test shot and then look on the back of the camera. If any part of the photo is actually blinking at you, that's telling you that that part of the photo will have no detail whatsoever. So what you're going to use is a thing called exposure compensation. You're going to take the shot. You're going to see that it's blinking. You're going to lower your exposure by 1/3 of a stop. So what you're doing there is the camera says, I think this is the proper exposure, but it's wrong. In this case, we have so many white things here in the room, there's so much white light and white everything, that it could actually destroy part of the photograph. So the exposure the camera thinks is right, You're saying, I'm seeing it, but it's not right, it's wrong. So you're going to go drop the exposure 1/3 of a stop using exposure compensation. There's a little button on the camera. You just hold, you dial it down 1/3. Take the shot again and look, do you still see the blinkies? If it's still blinking, drop it again. Now, if you wind up dropping it a stop and a half and all of a sudden your subject looks, dark, then you're either going to have to bring in a light or you're going to have a little bit of clipping. Here's the secret to clipping. Does it matter? Is the thing, like if it's her face that's clipping, if it's her eyes, the whites of her eyes or something like that, that absolutely matters. That's the worst thing that could happen. But if it's some little aspect in the background, if it's a little piece of metal on the window back there, do I care if that doesn't have perfect detail? Absolutely not. I could just let it go. So that's the recipe, is make sure that you don't have any clipping. Open it wide open on the camera, f2.8, or if your camera goes to f4, whatever the lowest number your lens will go to. Put it on a tripod and shoot low at the same angle as your subject. And that's how you do a very, very simple and easy window light portrait. All right, now we're going to do kind of a portrait shoot. This is Mark. Mark was also helping us out in the first video. So how you doing, Mark?
Good. How are you?
Thank you for being here, man.
Good to see you.
And we're setting them up like we're doing an engagement portrait here. Now, some of the things that you're going to do, most likely if you're doing an engagement portrait, you're going to wind up being in their own home. This is, of course, not their home, but you're going to have to deal with what is in their home. And in our case, we have natural light behind them. It's kind of nice because you can see the way it light Mark's hair and the light Shay's hair on the other side. So there's some really nice aspects to having it backlit. The problem is going to be is they're going to be a little dark to the camera. And this is one of the tricky things that that's going to really throw you off on the set, because your eyes will adjust. Your eyes are designed to show them fully lit, no problem, but the camera is still going to show them dark and the background light. So there's a couple things that we can do in camera and on the set to fix that. So the first thing we're going to do is let's get them positioned, and we're going to go over here to the camera position. So I'm going to shoot this wide this time, and so I'm kind of going to get a head and shoulders type of shot of them. We're going to shoot at, we'll start at the same thing we were at before, the f2.8, and we'll see what we get. Let's go ahead and get together there, guys, and very nice. You guys look like a real couple. All righty. So we take a look at the picture. You can see, even from where you're looking at, the screen is actually blinking. Those are the highlight warnings I was talking about earlier. And it's just blinking on and off. Let me turn it on again so you can see. Now, what is blinking is stuff that's outside. So I have to decide how important is it that that stuff's outside, but I can already tell you there's a problem. They look too dark. And that makes sense. They're backlit, so they're going to be too dark in front. So we're going to have to add light to this. There's a couple of different things that we can try. One of them is a reflector. We could try to take some of the light from the window and bounce it back to them. So I'm going to have Brad grab a silver reflector, and we'll try that and see how that works. But I imagine what we're going to have to wind up doing is bringing in some kind of a light source. But first, let's talk about the problem. Let's make the outside look good. So what I could do is, I took the shot. I know I have blinkies. I know I have highlight clipping already. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a test shot by dropping it down. I'm going to use my exposure compensation like I talked about earlier. So let's do that. Press the button, down 1/3 of a stop, and shoot again, and let's see if the blinkies are as bad. Nice, you guys. Okay, let's just compare the two. Oh, much better. It dropped the blinkies by about 50%, and the background now has more detail. I can actually see a little bit more outside the window. Now, it is perfectly acceptable, especially even in architectural photography, to have the outside be completely blown out. They used to try to struggle with that and try to always make the inside and the outside be balanced, but more and more, even in very high-end architectural photography and in portraiture, you can have the background blow out. But in this case, I think it's easy enough. Maybe we drop it 1/3 of a stop to -0.7, and then let's take a shot. Guys, one more time. Very nice. And look at that. The blinkies are gone. All right, so it took me 10 seconds to get rid of the blinkies in the background. So now I have the background looking great. You guys are too dark. Let me have Brad come in with a silver reflector, and let's see if that makes a big enough difference. So now, where are we going to place the reflector? Well, let's think about this. We have light coming in that way, so we've got to try to get some of the light from the window back onto them. And so Brad's going to hold the reflector here and try to get some on this way. Let me have you on this side, Brad, right over here. And so ideally what I want to do is the most important thing is to have some direction to your light. You want to have some direction so it's not flat lighting. So I want to have shadows on one side of their face. So what Brad's going to do is bring in a reflector and go ahead and put it down and bring it back up so they can see the difference, Brad. So you can see how the light, it's almost like he brought a light in here. And so now they're getting a little bit of light, and I want shadows on this side of their face and light on that side. Let me take a test shot and see how that does. Now, I'm just going to position Brad so he's just outside the frame. So you're actually in it a little bit, out. You're out right there. Let's take a look. All right, let me just compare with what we had before. Let's see. It's a little better, but there's just not enough light coming out through the window, so we're going to have to use a light. Now, we have two choices of what we can do for light, and whichever you're most comfortable with. If you're brand new to studio lighting, I'm going to recommend what we're going to use here on the set, which is it's called a hot light. In other words, it's a light that is always on. So you're not having to work with wireless strobes or anything. The particular one we're going to use is from a company called Westcott. It's a Westcott spider light, and it's called a TD5 is a particular one we're going to use. And David, if I can have you bring in this. David is our second assistant on the set today. Hi, David. How you doing, man? There's David, and he's helping us out. So I'm going to have David turn that around towards the camera if you'll actually kind of aim it this way. You can see it's just a big softbox, but the light on the inside it just stays on. There are actually 4 very, very large fluorescent bulbs in there. So what's nice about this is it's absolutely cool to the touch. So you don't have to worry about your subjects feeling any hot light on them. It is absolutely cool. You can put your hand right up to it. You can get this right up close to a baby or anything you want. There's absolutely no heat whatsoever. And what's nice is it's daylight balanced, which is particularly why I like to use it in a situation where we're using daylight in the room, because the light is already perfectly balanced to daylight. So what we're going to do is I'm going to have David swing this around there. We're going to get this as close to our couple as we can. You can see right now, just by looking, what a difference that made. There's the directional light I was looking for. Look at Mark's face. You can see a shadow from the camera position on the left side of his face. And look at Shay's nose. You can see a little bit of shadow, and that's exactly where you want it. Her cheek is still nicely lit. It's just instantly nice light. It can't be any easier. All you did was turn it on. And by the way, that's all you really can do with spider lights. They're on or they're off. There's no like dimming mechanism. That's nice if you're brand new to studio photography, because then you don't have to worry about it. You're just going to turn them on, and then you're just going to position it. Now, the key is, do you position it to the left or to the right? There's not really necessarily a rule of law to where that is, unless you already kind of have some light coming in one direction. You don't want to put it on the opposite side. But in this case, we had no light coming from up front, so we can put it on whatever side we like. I just put it on the right because I just figured it would look good, and it looks great. So that's also called luck. All right, let's see how you guys are looking. Let's take a test shot now. Oh, much, much better. I think I want to go a little brighter with it. So let me see how much closer I can get the light. Move it in just a little bit more, David. Keep going. Keep going. All right, you're in the frame, so pull out just a hair more right there, so we can get it nice. By the way, the closer you get the light to them, the softer and more wrapping the light will be. So it gets brighter, but it also gets softer, and that's kind of hard to get your head around when you're brand new to studio photography, but that's how it works. So the closer we get, we're using a bigger softbox. Why are we using such a big softbox? Because the bigger it is, the softer it is. So let's go ahead and get you guys nice and close. Very nice. All right, now I'm going to adjust my f-stop a little bit, and let's see if we can make this just a little bit brighter. Let's see how we're doing here. All right, we're at f4. Now, here's what you can do. If you want to get a little more extra light too, you can increase your ISO on the camera. So if I were to take my ISO up to like 800, all right, and don't even change my shutter speed, then it gets a little bit brighter as well. So very nice though, nice lighting, very, very easy. And guys, is it hot? You don't feel any heat from the light at all. It's completely soft. And what I really like about this is what you see is what you get. You just put the light there, and you're not wondering what's it going to look like when I fire the strobe. Exactly what you see in the set is what you get. I want to point out one real quick thing too also, and it's about the closeness of putting couples together. Now, I've worked with Mark and Shay before, so they knew instinctively when I got in here to get really, really close. One of the biggest mistakes that you see people make is they won't actually get as close as this. You'll say, okay, get close, and they have a gap between them. And the gap between them, they feel like they're very close. And I do this with husbands and wife all the time. Here's the trick to get them to get really close. Take the shot and you will physically see a gap between them. I walk over to them and I show them the back of the camera. I go, see that big gap between the two of you? And they go, oh yeah. They feel like they're close, but they're not. Now these two, they have no problem getting close, but a lot of people, they feel like they're really close, but they don't. These are professional models, so they're very comfortable with this. But even with a husband and wife, they feel like they're really close. Big gaps this big between their heads all the time. Very, very common. Show them the picture. Show them what the problem is. They fix it like that. Okay, so that's how we were able to fix this whole problem using just one simple light, a TD5 Westcott spider light, and a very large softbox. Alrighty, for this next setup we're going to use 3 lights. It's a very, very easy setup, but it does require one accessory that makes this look work. And that is you have to get the reflector that came with your strobe. If you don't have a reflector, chances are yours came with it. But if it didn't, you're going to need a reflector. But here's the thing that you're going to need, a grid spot. So why do you need these two? Well, first off, this one's going to help focus the light. Now, if you just have a bare bulb light like we have back here, the flash is just going to go everywhere. It has no direction. By putting the reflector on it, it kind of sends the light in somewhat of a direction. It sends it a little more like this, but it still kind of goes everywhere. Not nearly as bad as if you didn't have it on, so it does focus it to some extent. But this baby right here, this honeycomb grid spot, what it does is it sends the light in one direction. It just pops right inside of here. Now, I'm using an Ellen Chrome version of this. Depending on which strobe you have, yours may attach over the top, it may clamp on the top, you may have to tape it on. It just depends on which brand and make and model that you use. But in this case, they just snap right in and out. And they'll have different degrees, and the lower the number, the degree, the tighter the beam is going to be. So a 20-degree grid spot will give you a narrower beam than a 30-degree or a 40-degree. So once you pop this in here, we're going to pop this on the backlight. We're using 2 backlights. We're using one on the left, and so the subject will stand here. We're using one on the left and one on the right. In a minute, we're going to bring Mark in, and we're going to shoot very, very popular look, which has a rim light. So there's going to be a bright light on this side of his face, a bright light on this side of his face. We're on a black background, and that bright light's going to kind of remove him from the background. And then we're using this front light not really as so much of a main light, as a fill light. So the back's going to be very, very bright, and then we're going to bring in just a little bit of fill on the front to kind of fill it in. And I have it off to one side, so again, I'm getting directional light. So I'm going to have shadows on this side of his face. It won't all be in shadow because we're using a nice big softbox, but somewhat. So let's go ahead and attach this to the grid back here. Just going to attach this to the light, and then we'll turn the little lock so it stays on here. Something like that. All right, so now our grid spot's in place. So what you're going to need to do is let me have Mark come into the set, and we're going to have you stand right here, Mark. All right, now, what I want to do is I can kind of use the modeling lights. Let me turn this one on back here. So modeling lights are these little lights in the back that kind of help you see where the light's going to go. They don't entirely let you see, but they kind of give you an idea where the light's going to fall. So just by looking at this, you can kind of see the lights on one side of his head, on one side of the other. If I didn't use a front light, all you'd have is very, very bright Mark. Now, this is also actually a good technique to go ahead and build your lights in stages. We can turn the front light off if we want, not have it fire at all, and then I can just see what's happening. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to turn off the front light. I'm just going to let the back lights fire. Let me just go around here and just turn it off here. I'm actually just going to flip the power button to off. So now the front light's not going to fire, and then all I really have to worry about is aiming these two so it skims the side of his face. Now, settings in the camera. I'm shooting in manual mode because I'm with a strobe. let's take a look at what my settings are. I'm at 125th of a second, which is a good safe starting place for your shutter speed. And you're not going to change your shutter speed very much at all because your shutter speed really doesn't affect the strobes very much. It will affect like ambient light, but we don't really have much ambient light in here. So an ambient light just means the light that's already in the room light or whatever. What is going to affect everything is your aperture. So we set the shutter speed and kind of forget it. So let me just take a look and take a test shot of Mark right here. Very good, right into the camera. All right, if you take a look at the shot here, we have pretty much what I'm looking for. Now, there's a little bit of highlight clipping. If you notice on either side of his face, there's a tiny bit of highlight clipping. Well, the idea behind this particular look is really, really bright. If I have a tiny little bit, it doesn't really bother me that much. But at least I can see now if it's balanced. It's actually fairly well balanced, and the only way to do that is through trial and error. Now, I was able to see with these modeling lights, I can see pretty much, just even looking at Mark right here, I can see that this side of his face is pretty lit equally with the other side of his face. So both sides look pretty good, but of course, the middle of his face is completely dark. So then we'll turn on this strobe and do a test. But if you try to do this all at once, it's kind of tricky. Now, I'm going to probably keep the power on the very front one here as low as I can get it. On this particular one, the power setting is 1.5, and this thing will go up a lot higher. But at 1.5, it's not going to put out that much power. I really don't want to overlight it, and this is supposed to be a dramatic look. So what we're going to do is, let's do this. Let me come in here and get a kind of a wide shot on you here, Mark. And let's see. All right, well, we're getting a pretty good look. I don't know if there's... Okay, every once in a while you get lucky and it comes together. In this case, it really looks pretty good. I don't really have much to change. I've got the skim lights on both sides. I have the light to the side. It looks pretty good. All the shadows look good. Now I can just take a moment and kind of focus on working with Mark and getting the look that I want. So I'm going to shoot some portraits here. Let me go ahead and get a couple, and we'll just get a little bit better composition. Again, I'm focused on his eyes. Make sure the eyes are in, because if the eyes are out of focus, nothing else works. By the way, sometimes you'll see me when I'm doing this, moving the camera up and down like this. What that's doing is, it's me being lazy. Rather than actually moving the little dot up to his eye, what I'll do is, I'll focus on his eye, I'll hold the shutter button down halfway so it locks right there, then I'll recompose. But really the right way to do it is just save yourself the time. So the right way to do this, Mark, if I was really doing it the right way, is to press it down halfway, move the thing so it's already on your eye right where it is, so I don't have to keep recomposing. I can just worry about shooting. And then everywhere, even if I turn the camera this way or this way. All right, Mark, put your chin down a little bit for me, and actually look down. There you go. All right, that looks good. All right, put your hands together in front of, yeah, just like that, good. That way if I can get a little more shoulder in there, I can back off. I'm going to step back just a step or two and get a little bit more wide here. Just like that, very nice, very good look. All right, I'm going to have you actually look at the light. Don't look too far because I don't want to get too much of the whites of your eyes. Back a little more towards me. There you go, good, good, good. All right. All right, I'm going to have you look. So don't look to the center of the light, look a little bit over this way. A little bit more over towards me. Look, leave your head where it's at and just the eyes. There you go, perfect. Oh, that's good. So your eyes are right where they need to be. All right, if you take a look at his eyes, don't move. Can you hold that pose again? Take a look at where his eyes are. We're just seeing a little bit of the whites of it, and that's what we're looking for. Now, look a little, without moving your head, Mark, go ahead and look a little further. See all the whites right there? You see this again and again, and that's not what you're looking for. Now, bring your eyes back a little bit. See how he's still looking away? He's kind of in a two-thirds view, or a three-quarter view kind of thing, but he's not really, you're not seeing the whites of the eyes. You're seeing more iris, and that's what really looks good. Alrighty, now, there's something you're probably wondering about. So how do you control you have lights firing right into you? How do you keep from getting lens flare? And that's one of the things you're going to get. Well, there's a thing you can add to this that makes your life a lot easier than worrying about controlling lens flare, and those are flags. They're basically pieces of black fabric. And what we do is we put the black flags between you and those two lights in the back so it's not blowing you out. So I'm going to have Brad and David just bring in the flags real quick, and I'm going to shoot between them so it kind of makes a little bit of a tunnel. That way I don't have to worry about getting any lens flare off of those two back lights. So let me step back a few feet. All right, so from where I'm standing, let me move this a little bit more in. Perfect. I don't see those lights on the back at all. Now I get everything set first. Now I got this little tunnel to shoot through. I don't have to worry about any lens flare coming from there at all. And that alleviates one of the biggest problems. So how do you know if you're getting a lens flare? Well, number one is lens flare will actually wash out your photos. You may not just see the rings like you're accustomed to seeing outdoors and things, but what you will see is your photos look washed out, for lack of a better term. Now in some cases we're doing beauty stuff and you're shooting on white. Sometimes you're going to get a little bit of that. Certainly you can fix that in Photoshop with one slider. Just take the black slider and drag it to the right. But you know what? I don't want to have to fix it in Photoshop. I want to get it right in the camera. Putting up these flags is easy. And these flags are about 24 by 36. These are Westcott's. This one's a Westcott, and this one I think is from Avenger, I think, makes these. No, Matthews. Matthews makes those. Although I like the Westcott, honestly, I like the Matthews better. They're a little more rigid than these. These collapse down. These don't. So there is an advantage to each one of those, but I love the Matthews. Okay, so that's kind of a look at how to put this look together. I'm just going to shoot a couple more snaps of Mark, and then we're set to go. All right, let me have you look straight down, like really put your chin down, just like that. Good. That looks good. Very nice. All right, I'm going to have you look that way now. There you go. And now bring the eyes back a little bit more. Very good. Perfect. Right there. That's it. That's it. All right. Good job. Okay. We got it. All right, now we're going to do a completely different setup, and this one is going to be kind of, you might have heard it referred to as a clamshell or an over and under. It is a very, very nice portrait lighting, mostly used on women. It requires one light and a reflector or two lights, so we're going to do both in this segment here. But we're switching now to strobes, so now we're actually using flashes rather than instead of using the continuous spider lights. Now, we're going to have to trigger these flashes, right? We use wireless triggers. In this case, we're using an Elinchrom RX600 strobe. So to be able to use a strobe wirelessly, you need a transmitter that goes on the camera and a receiver that actually goes on the strobe. So when you press the shutter button, the strobe actually fires. The one that we use, because we're using Elinchrom, is these little things right here that are about the size of the matchbook. They're called Skyport, Skyport receivers. They're from Elinchrom. There's a couple of advantages of using these particular receivers. Number one, it's very small and lightweight. Number two is because we're using Elinchrom, I can change the power of the strobes from my camera position. Here's why this is a big deal. So let's say that I have this on my camera, and by the way, when you actually attach it, you attach it to the hot shoe of your camera. You just slide it on just like this. Slides on, and I pop up a little thing. There's a test button here. Make sure it fires your strobes. So now it's all in place. So let's say that I go ahead and get my aperture set. Let's say that I like to shoot at f11 when I'm trying to make sure their whole face is in focus. So I'll make sure that from the tip of their nose to the back of her head, everything all the way through. Perfect focus. And again, of course, I'm focusing on the eye. So I know I want to be at f11. So now what I want to do is, and I know I have to be, since these are strobes, I have to be under really 1/200th of a second. Now I talked earlier when you're using a flash about being under 1/250th of a second. That's fine for an on-camera flash. But with these strobes, or any kind of strobes like this, now we're going to drop it down to 1/200th of a second. And by the way, what happens if you go above that? You'll see a black bar go across the bottom of your photo. So if you're ever shooting and you see kind of like a black, almost like a black bar across the bottom, you know that you're above 1/200th or 1/250th of a second. Well, that being aside, let's go back to f11. So we're at f11. I take a test shot, and it's too bright or it's too dark. Well, take a look. We're using a boom stand to have this light. How am I going to change the power of this light? I'm going to have to walk over here, lower the boom stand, knock it down a couple of tenths of a stop, put it back up, go back over here and test. That is such a pain, but that's the way we've been doing it all these years. However, with these, there's actually a plus and minus button right on it. I can change the power of the strobes from my camera position, so I can fire. If it's not bright enough, up, 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 fire again. Up, 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 fire again. I can lock in my exact amount of power I want right here. So I'm really pretty much going to leave my shutter speed and my aperture alone, and instead I'm going to raise and lower the power of the strobes. Now, there's another thing you can do too, and that's use BXRI if you're using Elinchrome's BXRIs. They have the little transmitters built in. If you look up at this light here, you can see there's one of these puppies hanging off the top of it. It looks like a little matchbook hanging off there, which means that I have to buy one of these and one of those for every light. If you buy Elinchrome's BXRI series, which are actually a little less expensive than these, those receivers are built right in. So we use those an awful lot too because they're just so convenient. I never have to worry about, did I remember to bring all the receivers? Because they're built right in. So then all I have to take is this one little matchbook. But otherwise, you can use you don't have to use these Elinchromes. You can use things like Pocket Wizards. But the advantage here again is I can control all my lights without ever leaving my camera. All right, now that that's set up, we're going to bring Shay in just a moment, and we're going to position her kind of right here. The reason why this look is called a clamshell is because you're going to be shooting kind of right in between here. Now, I'm going to have her come in. We're going to take a test shot, but having just one light up here is probably going to look, because it's straight above her, and kind of, you're going to probably have a lot of shadows and things. So then we're going to have Brad come in, and he's going to bring in a reflector. We can use either a white reflector or a silver reflector. When would you use white and when would you use a silver? White is going to reflect less light. It's going to kind of be a little softer and smoother, but it's going to reflect a less amount of light. If I have Brad flip it over to the silver side, it's going to reflect a lot more light, and we'll try both of those. So let's go ahead and bring Shay in, if you will. I'm going to have Shay stand right here. And so you can see the light is actually directly in front of her, and I'm going to be able to shoot under it. So I'm going to go ahead and fire a test shot real quickly here. And let me just give you, I'm in manual mode. I'm at f11 at 125th of a second, which is really a pretty good starting place. So let me just kind of work on this. There we go. I'm putting my sensor right on her eye, and we'll take a test shot. And well, it's a little dark. The power of the strobe could probably go up just a little bit. So what I'm going to do is I have this one assigned to group 1. When you're actually setting this up, on every light you can choose, I want that to be on group 1. If I add a background light, it can be group 2. If I add another one, it can be group 3. That way I can control each light individually. So I switch this to group 1. That's that light is assigned to. And I'm just going to bring up the power a little bit. I'm going to press the plus sign, 1, 2, 3, 4. So I moved that 4/10 of one stop. And let's take a test shot. And it got a little bit brighter. Let's kind of compare the two. Ooh, yes, it got quite a bit brighter. But that's actually a bit better. I still think it's a little dark, but you can see some of the problems we have with the photo. There's a lot of shadows under her eyes. Her eyes look kind of dark, and there's lots of shadow under her chin. Let's go up 1, 2 more and take another test shot. All right, right at the camera. How about a little bit of a smile? Very nice. All right, so we still have a lot of shadows on the face and things. The front lighting is really pretty good. So I'm going to have Brad come in now. We're going to bring in a reflector. So we're going to start off with a white reflector. Now Brad's going to get right up under her chin with that. I'll tell you when you're in the shot. All right, you're in the shot. Come down, down, right there. All right, you want to get as close as you can. And Brad, just tilt it down a little bit, and very nice. All right, well, a tremendous difference between the first one and the second one. Look at the shadows on her neck. It was completely dark, almost black under her neck. Now, boom. Look at her eyes, especially under the eyes. I mean, it just really, really lit things up. Flip it over to the silver side now, Brad. Let's try. Now things should get even punchier. Let me make sure you're not in the shot. You can go up a little, up a little, up a little. Stop. Come down. Yeah, right there. Perfect. Very nice. All right, and that's even punchier. Wow. Much, much, much more punchier. I'm saying wow like I didn't realize that was going to happen. The big difference here was, in that one, was her eyes. Her eyes really, really came out. It really helped neutralize the shadows even more. So you can get a nice look right then, and we can just say, okay, well now we can just really focus on working with Shay and getting the look that we're looking for, because the lighting is right now just using that one thing. If you wanted to take it up another step, if you have a second strobe, I would recommend this is where the real clamshell look of this comes in, because what we're going to do is we're going to create kind of a clamshell like this. So one light is aiming down this way, the other light's aiming like this, and you're shooting between the two. So we're going to bring in now a second strobe. We have David on the side bringing in a second strobe. We have a very large softbox on this. You do not need as large a softbox as this. And you're going to see what David's going to do here is to keep these things from falling over. One easy trick that we can do is rotate the legs around. You see how he's rotating the leg? He's rotating the leg so it matches the boom arm side. So on top is group 1, on bottom is group 2, and I'm going to power it way down. I'm just going to hit minus, 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 and it'll kind of get that. And let's just do a test shot and see now that we actually have a strobe on the bottom. And wow, well, I mean, a tremendous difference between putting a reflector there, because now we actually have 2 lights. Now you have light coming from the bottom, coming from the top, and it's a very, very bright, happy kind of look. It's a very, your subject's face almost gets a glow, and now you can kind of tip this thing slightly back or forward to really make sure that you've covered all the shadows. Let me go ahead and take a couple of shots now while we've got this here, and get in nice and close. This is really great when you want to do just a really close face-up shot. And by the way, Shay, I'm just right in here on you, so you kind of know where I'm at. Give me just a little bit of smile. Ooh, that looks good, except for I'm not focused on your eye. It was on your hair. There we go. Very nice. Let's see how that's looking. Great. Let me pull it back a little. I got in a little too tight. Ooh, that looks good. Okay, so that's basically the clamshell look. You can again get away with it with just 1 light on top and the reflector, but having 2 lights gives you that extra bit of control, because now if I think the bottom's not bright enough, I can turn up the power and I can do it right from here. The problem with the reflector is you don't have that option. However much light comes off that reflector is what you get. There is no turn it up, I need more light on the bottom, because the only way you can get more light on the bottom is to turn the light up on the top, and then things get crazy out of balance. So there definitely is an advantage if you have 2 strobes to doing it that way. All right, now we're going to do a variation on a theme. Now you're looking up thinking, well, that looks pretty similar. Yeah, it does. We've got a light on a boom stand, strobe on a boom stand aiming back at 45 degrees. So different than the one we did with Mark earlier where it was kind of straight down. This one's kind of aiming back, all right? We're going to do a traditional beauty look. Now a beauty look is usually shot on a white solid background. You see a black background back here. Well, we have a trick to getting a solid white background, because when you want to do this kind of beauty shot, there's 2 things you want. You want wrapping light to wrap around the subject's face, kind of really nice wrapping all the way around the edges. Number 2 is you want a solid white background. You want the actual background to blow out to white, so it's almost like blown out highlights. Well, there's a technique we can use using the actual light itself that'll give us kind of the beauty look we're looking for. Now here's the kicker. You also have to prepare the model to look right for this. So a couple of key things are, is they're going to have to pull their hair back in a ponytail. So a ponytail in the back, and you don't really want to see the hair in the back. And if there are any little stray hairs hanging out, that is something we'll remove in Photoshop, because it's a little too hard to kind of tangle those on the set. So also this is an off the shoulders shoot. So because you want to be able to see a little bit of shoulder, a lot of neck, head, and just really focuses right in on the face. So what we're going to do is we're going to have Shay come into this set in just a moment. She's wearing like a tank top. We're going to have her pull both of the sleeves down so she has bare shoulders. Now if someone can wear a bare shoulder like tube top or something like that, that works just as well. Now, but how are we going to get that white perfect background and the wrapping light and all with just 1 light? Well, what we're going to do is we're going to use this light just like you see it. So we're going to put a large softbox back here, in this case a 39 by 39, but use whatever your big softbox is. If it's bigger, you can go with a bigger one. What we're going to do is we're actually going to take this in a moment and we're going to have Brad turn it so it's flat. So she's actually standing in front of the softbox, and the softbox is going to kind of be aiming up at this light. That's to kind of help minimize the lens flare, because we're probably going to have a little bit of lens flare. Now, we can set up a tunnel, and we probably will in just a few minutes, so we'll set up a tunnel to help me shoot through that to minimize that. But in the meantime, let's go ahead and get the background in place. So I'm going to bring in Brad, and Brad's going to put the background. All we're going to do, I put this sideways so you can see, so it's going to be up, angling up at a 45-degree back, and then it is our white background right there. All right? So this light is kind of aiming up at that light, and the reason why we have it aiming up too is so it's not aiming straight right dead into the camera. So now your subject goes right in between here. You're going to shoot through there. It's going to wrap light around both sides of your subject, and then it's going to come here. So we're going to bring Shay in for just a moment. and we're going to position her kind of in between these two. And you see her hair's back in a ponytail for the look. And then we're going to have her just pull her straps down so we have the off-the-shoulder look. And again, if you know you're going to do this look with your subject before they get there, you can tell them, make sure you're bringing something that's off the shoulder. In this case, we can improvise. It was no problem whatsoever. One thing about this is I need to get my angle of view up just a little bit higher. That's why we use these apple boxes you see down here over on the floor. A lot of studios have these, and it's just a very, very solid platform to stand on, so you can get up just about a foot height. Because the way I'm going to compose this is from right here going up. And so to get that kind of angle of attack, for lack of a better term, and keep most of her head in the shot, I'm going to need to be up just a little bit higher. We're going to shoot this in portrait style, so I'm going to be shooting tall, which is why it helps to have one of these battery grips on here, because then I've got a trigger at the top of my camera. So let me go ahead and take a test shot here first, and let's see where we're at. All right, now, Shay, I'm going to have you look straight at the camera, chin down just a little bit, and we already have the hair back. Let's see how that looks. That looks good. All right, now I can see from here the whole background is blinking. The entire thing is blinking, and it should be blinking. Let's put it on again here so you can see. Because that's what you want. You really want that whole background just blinking bright white. That means it's all blown out. But the thing I'm looking for is, does the light come wrapping around her face? Absolutely it does. There's something missing though. As I look at this, I can see that it's a little bit dark in here because we just have the one light coming from underneath. We're going to need to add one third component to this. We have the back light, we have the front light, we're going to need a reflector. I'm going to have Brad bring in a silver reflector. Let's try silver this time because I want to push a lot of light back up in there, and he's going to put it just below her neck, and I'm going to make sure it doesn't get in the shot. So let me go here, and Brad, bring it down just a little bit. All right, good, right there. And just look straight at the camera, Shay. Very nice. All right. Let me just take a look at the difference. Absolutely like night and day. You can see here the previous shot had lots of shadows under her chin, shadows under the eye, and the next one, her whole face is literally glowing. That's the look you're looking for, that kind of glow. Let's go ahead and take a couple more shots with this, and then we'll go ahead and build our, we'll use our flags to minimize any of the washout from this, all right? Again, I'm focusing right on the eyes. This time I have them right focused on the eyes. Very nice. A little bit of a smile, Shay. There we go, nice. All right, so now I'm gonna have David and Brad bring in the, just to kind of minimize how much, and bring it in. I just need a little tiny sliver because I'm shooting wide, so bring them in kind of tight. And I'm gonna have you push back just about a foot, if you guys will. All right. Hey, while we're doing this, can you take just a look at that stand? You want to show them the stand? This is kind of a new stand. These stands are great if you're like shooting weddings and you're in a church, because what happens is when you set them down, they automatically expand. Go ahead and set it down. They're called cheetah stands, are they, Brad? Yep. All right, they're called cheetah stands. And when you lift them up, watch how they collapse. You move them where you want them and just set them back down, and they set right back down. Where this works so great for wedding photographers is a lot of times you're having to shoot inside a church in between pews. So you can pick this thing up, move inside a pew, set it right back down, and it expands. Those things are incredibly handy for shooting weddings. And since David's a wedding photographer, you like those cheetah stands?
Very much.
Aren't those cool? Those things are really great. That has nothing to do with what we're talking about, but I guess it kind of does in some level. All right, Brad, bring this one in just a little bit. I just need a thin little slit to shoot through right there. All right, that's going to help minimize some of the spill from anything. And let me make sure I'm not getting the, there we go. Let me close in a little tighter. Brad's got that in there. And got it, great. The colors look much more saturated. I'm not getting any kind of spill. And let me take a couple of more. And just one thing you have to make sure when you're shooting this is not to see the ponytail in the back. I also like to get most of the head, the whole head and everything in the shot. Very nice. All right, great. Okay, another shot. Again, we're only really using two lights. The reflector is kind of acting as our third light, bouncing light back up in there, and the two flags that we did help control the whole thing. All right, now we're going to look at shooting food. This is a lot of fun to shoot. You see food shot in a lot of different ways. You see it, of course, in magazines and things like that, but also Food is a great thing to shoot when you're on vacation. Actually, the food that you're having on vacation. If you look at any travel magazine, look at every single story, because food is such an important part of the travel experience. You'll always see shots in there. I'm going to start with a studio shoot, but I'm going to give you some tips on how to shoot as well when you're shooting food out on location, so when you're on vacation. First off, one of the keys to shooting food, there's a couple of keys. Number one is the lighting. Most professional food shots you're going to see are very, very strongly lit with backlight. So most of the light is coming from the back. So what your job's going to be is to kind of fill in the shadows. So what we did in this case was we have a salad here. And we're actually going to have the salad as close to the window as we can get it, because we want a lot of light coming from the window. So we have nice natural light coming here, but look at all these shadows in here. There's also a lot of shadows in the food. What you really want is, you want the food to be very, very bright, and you want it to be nicely, evenly lit, and you want to kind of minimize the shadows. So in some way, we're going to have to fill in the shadows. Now, if you're in a restaurant, what you would do is literally take a white napkin and kind of hold it up on this side of the food. So the light, wherever it's coming from in the restaurant that you're eating, you would hold the napkin over here and use the natural light will bounce off the napkin and back onto your food. I'd kind of maybe put the napkin right here to fill in these shadows under here. In a studio situation, I would go ahead and put your, if you don't have a natural window, I would use a natural window as always my first choice for lighting food. But if you don't have one of those, you'll have to put a strobe back there. Make it a very bright strobe. And in fact, if you have a strobe with a reflector or even a grid spot, that's even better. So it's a nice, consistent beam of light. I would put it maybe right back here coming this way or at an angle. All right. Instead, we're going to use the spider lights. Spider lights are great for this, the direct lights. We'll just turn this on right here. We'll just go 1, 2, 3, and that takes care of some of the shadows. You're going to position this to kind of minimize the shadows and brighten up the food. You can see right there we got rid of quite a few of them. I can also have Brad bring in a reflector, and that'll get rid of some of them too, but I'm going to show you another trick. Before we do, I want to tell you the second thing that's really important about food. If you look at commercial food photography, you'll notice that traditionally most of the food is out of focus. They'll use a very, 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 very shallow depth of field. So you're talking about shooting maybe at f2.8 or f4 or whatever the lowest number your lens will allow. So that part of it's in focus and part of it's out. I'm using my 70 to 200 lens here, and I'm going to zoom way, way in on the food. Now, it's already looking better because we've got this. So our main light is behind it. This is used as a fill light. So I'm going to get down low. And also, your shooting angle, you want to be a little higher than the food. People seem to find the food shoots more pleasant if it's almost kind of like you're sitting down at the meal. So a lot of times we'll shoot things right at their same level. In this case, we're going to shoot up a little higher and kind of shoot down a little on the meal. So I've zoomed in quite a bit. I'm at f2.8, so the focus is kind of critical. And because like for example, I'm focusing on the noodles in the very front of the plate. When I click and take the shot, the noodles are sharp in focus, but believe it or not, so look at these. These noodles are in focus. The plate right here is out of focus. And the further you move back in the meal, the plate goes more and more out of focus. Now, let's go ahead and do another trick. Now, this trick I learned from a tremendous food photographer who's based right here in New York City, Lou Manna. If you get really serious about wanting to learn food photography, he has an entire book on it, and he also does workshops. But one of the things that he really turned me on to that changed the way I do food photography is it's a very inexpensive trick, but it has great results. And that is to buy little inexpensive mirrors. I went to literally like the pharmacy, the local pharmacy, and bought these little tiny mirrors here. And what these little mirrors do, they act like little tiny lights. So what I do is I'll place them in here, and you can see that I can actually aim these like lights. So look, I can aim them right at the food. So any place in the food that looks dark, like kind of right in here, I can just aim it down. Because these are continuous lights, it's particularly easy. Boom. It's like buying another light for like $3 or $4. Here, let me grab another one. I can kind of bring it in here, and I just move it. You can actually see the light as you move. Right, look at that, right there. There's no light, and then it's almost like I turned on a little tiny little spotlight right there on that side of the food. Now, you want to make sure they don't get in your picture, so I might move these over a little bit, re-aim my spotlight so you don't see them. Same thing over here, kind of right in there. And now let's go back to the camera position and see how we're doing. Well, I moved the food a little, so, oh yeah, boy, it looks nice and bright in there. Let's just go get a couple more shots. You can see it's out of focus. I'm going to come back a little, And if I go, there we go. I want to make sure I don't see the stuff in there, and we'll get a little bit closer. Also, this works very, very nicely. Works very, very nicely with a telephoto lens or a macro lens. Now, a macro lens is used a lot in food photography, and things are really, really out of focus. You'll actually see this much in focus and the rest is out of focus, but it's very, very, very popular in food photography. But just remember, if you're doing it on this type of lens, like a 70-200, you're going to be at a very, very shallow depth of field, f2.8. If you decide to do this with a macro lens, you're going to get a lot closer. Your lens is going to be this close. You're going to be way up here. Then you want to be at like f22, because the depth of field is so shallow for macro already, you won't be able to see the food in focus. You're going to want to shoot at f22. Makes a big, big difference. So there's a couple of tips. Now, again, when you're out at a restaurant, you're not going to be able to do all this, so you're going to use either a napkin or a very, very small reflector. I'm going to have Brad step in with a larger reflector just to give you an idea. And actually, you can just hand this one to me, Brad. I'll just step right in here. And so you can see that I'm going to be able to bounce the light from the window kind of back into the food. And that's all you want to do. Watch how when I move it away, look at the shadows under the plate. When I bring it in here, I can kind of eliminate some of those shadows. So that's what you're going to do in the restaurant. Now, you can buy a very, very small reflector or even a small little card, but they have reflectors that, I kid you not, they're this small, and they open them up, they're this big. If you're going to be shooting stuff on your vacation, buy one of those. They're very inexpensive. They just pop right open. You can keep it with you. You can keep it in your camera bag or keep it wherever you are, and have a little reflector. Put it right there, right beside your food. Get it as close as you can in without it being seen. But just remember, look at the direction of your light, and you're going to use it to kind of pop it in there. But there's a couple of tips you can do. Oh, we have one. All right. Small reflector. Let me just get rid of this big thing. All right. Small reflector lets you get in here and put light wherever you want it. This little tiny reflector takes the light that's already there. You can actually see it kind of here. Just reflecting the light wherever you want to get it. All right, so there's a couple of tips. I like that. Whee! A couple of tips for you shooting food on location and shooting food in the studio. All right, the shot you saw in the book was actually done with natural light. And so step one of this is getting to a window that has natural light like we have here. So we're just going to open up the window. That's first stop. Next, we're going to try to get this, get the flower itself. In this case, we're using a Gerbera daisy. We're going to get it as close to the window as we can. We put in a little bit of water here. Now, we're going to use a macro lens for this shot. So there's all kinds of different macro lenses. This is actually a little bit of an older one, but they work great. But there's a couple things you want to know about working with macro lenses. Number one is they actually work better if you can get them straight. You see how I'm angling down? If you look at the actual from the side here, if you look, the whole camera is kind of angling down at it. What you really want to be able to do is to have the camera straight. So ideally, the camera would be like this. Now, why is that? Well, because you want the maximum depth of field you can get. You want maximum depth of field all throughout the image. So what we're going to have to do is, number one, we're going to try to go to at least f22. So we have maximum depth of field that we can get. Number two is we're going to try to make the plane of the camera kind of straight. So the way we do this is we're actually going to adjust the height of the tripod legs so that it's kind of aiming straight on it. So in this case, what I would do is just loosen the legs of the tripod, bring it down a little bit to where it's going to be kind of straight. We're going to loosen this one as well. Get it kind of straight. How are we doing there? Pretty close, and then we'll come around to this side. Get this one so it's pretty straight on. That's about the hardest time I've ever had actually straightening my legs. There we go, pretty straight on. Now that we're there, you can get very, very close. It's a macro lens. You can get really, really, really close. But I'm using the Westcott pop-up background. Now, for the one that you actually saw in the book, I actually just bought a piece of felt. I actually went to the local fabric store and I bought a yard of just black felt. What's nice about felt is it absorbs light. And so I just took 2 clips and clipped it up just a few feet behind the back. Now, today we have a black background that we can use, this pop-up one that we've been using all day, so I just thought I'd use that instead. So this is entirely lit with just light coming in from the window. It's north light, so it's a nice facing light. And then all we're going to do is we're going to kind of just aim at one part of this, because this is a close-up lens, this macro lens. And it's also a zoom, so I can kind of zoom in and get where I want it to. Now, one thing that you want to do with this, you must shoot on a tripod for macro shots. Any tiny little slight movement is going to make a difference. Also, if you have a cable release, I would definitely attach a cable release to make it so you can trigger it by pressing a shutter button. What if you don't have a cable release with you? Or what if Brad isn't standing by with a cable release, like he's not standing by with one right now? Then here's what you can do. You can actually go into your menu and set it to do a self timer. And then when you press the shutter button, it's going to beep for a few seconds and take the shot for you. So what are you looking for in your exposure? Well, just like any other time, we want to make sure that we don't have any kind of blinkies or highlights or like that, and we don't. And we really, there's nothing much really to do here except for now come up with some interesting compositions. Hey, look, Brad not only has one, but two, all kinds of different remotes. Okay. So what this allows us to do, thank you, Brad, what this allows us to do is to actually control when we take the shot. It's just a simple plunger, plugs into the camera, ka-chow, we'll shut it off, rather than having to wait the 10 seconds. So, oh, speaking of that, I have this, the default setting on most cameras is 10 seconds for the self-timer. You can go into the menu and change it to 2 seconds or 5 seconds. I always set mine at 2 seconds because I'll use this for landscape shoots because I always forget these things. When I have my full camera bag, it's always in there. I don't always take, sometimes I take just throw a couple of things in the bag and roll. And when I don't have that, then I know I can use the self-timer. So here, let's go ahead and assign this, or attach this to the camera. If you pop off the front, there's a little rubber stopper on the front of the camera, and we're just going to screw it right in there. There we go, right in the side here. Just pops right in there. Screw it on tight. Now you can take it back to regular mode so we don't have to worry about firing it, and now we can fire it. So now we can just focus, take your hands off the camera once you get it where you want it. And this is an autofocus lens, so we're going to let it focus a little bit, figure out where we want things. And I actually think I turned off the focus ring here. There we go. There we go, nice. And snap a couple of shots. And you can get back off a little bit. And of course, we're shooting the back side of the flower like I did in the book, but you can also shoot, of course, the front of the flower. And we also have some other flowers. I have a very nice calla lily. I'm going to go ahead and drop that in here real quick. While we're doing that, while they're getting that, I'm going to go ahead and see if I can get this thing to actually stay around. Since the bottom of this is going to be out of the picture, I could put a piece of gaffer's tape to just hold the front of the flower there, because it's not going to, let me see if I can get David to grab some gaffer's tape, because you can see it doesn't want to stay. It longs to go another way. But we'll get it, I'll hold it right there, and David's going to put a piece of gaffer's tape on that right there. Oops, let me just turn it back this way. Look at that. Amazing how compliant flowers come when they have a gaffer's tape. And let's go ahead and get a shot over here. Very nice. All right. Now we can get really, really tight on this. I'm going to really, really zoom in. You can see that the petals, when you focus on different areas, are going to go right out of focus. Let's kind of go over to the side here. There we go. One part's in and one part's out. That's that super shallow depth of field. And we've done a lot of things here to kind of keep things in focus. You can see the plane has changed a little bit. I should probably raise this up just a hair for some of these shots. Let me move to the other side here and just focus right in there. All right, so that's how easy that is. Let's go ahead and bring in the calla lily. We're going to swap out the gerbera with the calla lily here. And we're going to keep some gaffer's tape handy just in case. I'm going to let this one kind of fall this way. And actually, Brad, if you'll take the whole table and move it to the left a little bit. I mean, I'm sorry, your other left. Sorry. I said left and pointed, and I actually want to move the other way. There we go. I'm going to back up a little bit. So it looks like it might be just a little tall. But what I can do is I can adjust the height of the camera. So I'm going to go ahead and pull these legs back out again. Much better. Now I just have to straighten it out so it's kind of straight. And then let me see what we've got as we zoom in and check out our calla lily. Trying to get right in the edge. Sometimes it has a hard time focusing when it's not right on the edge. All right, nice. Now, again, I'm keeping an eye on the highlights to make sure nothing blows out. Let me just turn this a little bit more towards the camera. I'd like to be able to shoot kind of into it if I can. A little bit more interesting angle. Rather than moving the whole camera rig, I'll just move the flower. How's that? Something like that. So I'm kind of shooting right. I'll take my little bit of gaffer's tape, just tape it right on there like that. And then make sure that it's nice, tight. Come around. Oh, that's a much better view. There we go. You can back off a little now and get a shot. There we go. Something like that. Okay, so there's just a couple of little tips on doing macro photography using natural window light. A very, very easy setup. And keep those couple of things in mind about the level of this, the f/22, and using your plunger instead of your camera, because you're going to try to minimize camera shake. That's going to be one of the most critical things, because this is all about focus and keeping the image from moving. All right, now we're on location. We're down here in Manhattan, and we're going to do a daylight shoot. Now, we got harsh daylight, the sun's right out there, but we're going to use the same diffuser that we used in the studio out on the street because it works brilliantly. We're going to shoot a headshot of Shay out here. We're going to use the 70-200, and we're going to open it wide open. We're going to be at f/2.8. What that's going to do, it's going to throw the background out of focus, make her pop off the background and get all the distracting stuff, because you can see behind me there's a lot of distracting junk back there. But what we're going to do is, because we're shooting in nice and tight and I'm at f/2.8, the lowest number this lens will go, it's going to throw everything out of focus, and it really just separates her from that busy background. If I shoot her at f/11 out here, problem's going to be she's just going to blend right in. It's going to look like a snapshot, not the kind of portrait that we want to get on location. So I'm going to have Shay come in, and then once she's in place, we're going to have Brad come in with that tri-grip diffuser. Now, the tri-grip diffuser actually has a little strap over it because it's a little windy today. What the strap's going to do is keep it from flying out of Brad's hands, because it's kind of windy, but these are the situations we have. The client hired you for this day. You can't say, I can't shoot, it's a little windy outside. So that thing comes in handy. You're going to have to deal with it as we are. So everything's set up here. I'm shooting in aperture priority mode, and I'm shooting at f/2.8. The camera's going to take care of everything else. All I have to worry about is actually composing the shot. The wind's going to blow Shay's hair around. I don't care. That'll look kind of cool. But the most thing I'm worried about is controlling the light, making sure that it's soft, making sure that it spreads nicely and it looks good. So let's have Shay come into the set over here. All right, and now we're going to take a couple of test shots, and then I'll have Brad come in. These look pretty good, but the light is really just a little bit harsh, so we're going to soften that. Let me have Brad come in, and we're going to keep the diffuser as close to her head as we can so it gets a real nice glow. See how it puts a little shade right over her? Very nice. Good. I'm getting down a little lower here so I can kind of get the buildings in the background. Let me get a couple of verticals here. Nice. Now I got to make sure that my it's still focused on her eye. It's at the focus point right there. Let's turn some for a little more energy this way. Very good. The wind's working pretty good for what we're trying to do here. Let's see how we're looking. Now I'm blowing out the background on a lot of these shots, and I don't really care. It's just background. But if I wanted to fix that, all I'd have to do, let's drop it 2/3 of a stop, and let's try again. See if I can keep a little more detail in the background. That pretty much did it. These actually look a bit better. Very nice. What's nice is New Yorkers, as they drive by, they yell out encouraging things as you go. I heard one just yell cheese. That's nice. That kind of helps. All right, so that's all there is to doing it. The whole key is having a tri-grip diffuser. Now, this is one of those cases where you really do want an assistant, especially if it's windy. I don't care how big a sandbag you have, that thing is going to go over, because that thing's almost kind of like putting a sail out in the wind. It's going to fall over for sure every time. You can put 4 sandbags on it, eventually it's still going to go over, or just come loose from the coupling and fly away. It's one of those times where you need to get a friend to help you out on the set. Now we're going to head back up in the studio and pick up where we left off. All right, for this look, we're going to do something that's a little bit similar to what we did earlier. We're just going to use one light. And for this look, we put the light directly up above. So it's angled back just a tiny bit, but basically you're having light just kind of gushing straight down on your subject. So they're going to stand kind of basically under this, let the light wash down on them. So there's one problem with this technique. The problem with this technique is that their eyes can turn absolutely black. The sockets and everything can turn black. So what we have to do generally is to have your subject tilt their head up a little bit. If you look at the shot that I took from the book, the guy's holding a MacBook, and we're going to have Mark hold a MacBook for us here in just a moment. But he's kind of laughing, he's kind of tilted back a little, ha ha, and that way I was able to get a little light in his eyes. So we're going to have to work with Mark to make sure that he either looks up at the light or tilts his head back a little, or when he's laughing or making a gesture that he's looking up. Because if not, now, can I go back there and fix it in Photoshop? Absolutely. You know how I feel about that. I don't want to have to fix it if I don't have to. So I'd rather fix it here on the set. So the setup is quite easy. It's just one light straight overhead with a boom. Not much to it, but it's really great for guys. This is not a good flattering shot for women. It's not going to be very pretty. This is kind of a nice, harsh, edgy look for a guy. Now, what I'm going to have him do is we'll come in. The settings for the camera, we're in manual mode, of course, 125th of a second, and we're at like f7.1. So that's pretty, you know, f8, something like that is a good starting place, anywhere between 5.6 and f8. And all you're going to do is take a few test shots. I want to make sure that he's solid all the way through. I could go all the way to f11, right? f11, I know it's going to be all the way sharp all the way through. And that's kind of a nice sweet spot. Also, f11 on a lot of lenses is kind of a nice sharp spot as well. But so if I wanted to go to f11, what would I do? Well, all I have to do is adjust the power of the lens of the strobe, because once I set it at f11, I know I've told the camera I really want this to be sharp all the way through. So the one thing I'm going to adjust is not the camera. Once I set it at 1/25th and f11, then I'll be adjusting the power of the strobe up and down. If it's too dark at f11, I'll just increase the power of the strobe. If it's too light at f11, I'll decrease the power of the strobe. That's all there is to it. It's not, I think a lot of people think this is really a very, very complicated thing, but especially with a one light shoot like this, it couldn't be easier. All right, we're using a black background. The black background's a pop-up background from Westcott, same one we'll be using all day. Let's bring Mark into the set. And Mark's holding a power book here. Mark actually just became recently a Mac owner, so it's kind of authentic in some way. Now, the guy I shot at the picture that you saw at the beginning of this, he is a Mac freak, so that's why we had him hold it was very his personality. Mark is not yet a Mac freak, so he's a new Mac owner. So he probably won't love it as much as the guy in the first shot did. All right, let me have you hold it up kind of like he did, a little up higher for me, if you will. And let's go ahead and take a test shot, and I'm going to kind of go, I need to actually back up a little bit, so we're going to actually ask Adam, our cameraman, to back up a little bit too. By the way, that was Adam's salad we shot earlier. He did finally get to eat it. Okay, here we go. Let's, there we go. That looks good, very good. All right, looks pretty good. His head was tilted back a little, so we got a little bit of light in the eyes, but I kind of captured you when your eyes were almost closed. So let's take a couple of more shots here. I'm going to back out just a little bit more. Now, I'm having to be careful. That looks good. All right, now let's see if we can, now what do we have to do to actually, okay, so that's his fake professional model smile. What do we actually have to do to get him to do the real non-fake smile? Okay, that was closer, that was closer. All right, very good. Okay. All right, good. That looks good. That looks good. That is a almost kind of real looking fake model smile. See, that's the kind of stuff that you can mess with Mark about. And okay, we're getting it good. We're getting some light in there in the eyes. That's good. He's doing a good job. Now, here's the thing. We're very lucky to be working with a professional model. You're not always working with a professional model or a professional cameraman that bangs into things on the set. Sometimes you're working with amateur cameramen and just regular people. So it's very easy to work with Mark. You can tell Mark, look over here, look over there, tilt up, tip down. It's going to be a little harder when you're working with doing a portrait of maybe an executive or somebody on location. Just going to have to remember to keep directing them, because they'll remember for one shot. They'll look up for one shot. Mark can hold that pose all day long, but when you're not working with a professional model, they'll hold it for one pose and then look back down. So don't get all tied up in what's going on in the camera and forget what they're doing here. Let me take a couple more shots of Mark here for this. There we go. Very nice. Good. And I'm tilting the camera a little just to get some of these. Let's shoot a couple of portrait style here too. That'll probably look pretty good. It's a little different than the shot. Well, this looks actually looks really good. Let's take a look. All right. And see how he's keeping that up, looking up thing pretty good. Let me see the little teeth there. There we go. Very nice. Good. These look pretty good. I'm shocked. Anyway, so there's a very, very, very simple look. It's just a slight adjustment, kind of what we did on the kind of that beauty portrait we did earlier with the clamshell look and the over and under. You're just not doing any kind of reflector underneath. Now, could you put a reflector and add a little bit of light in there? You absolutely could. Let's grab Brad. Let's have him use a white reflector and just kind of stick it in there. Let's see what that does here. We're going to grab Brad and we're going to stick a white reflector in there and just see what a little bit of light. I don't want to throw a whole bunch of light. If we use silver, it's going to throw a lot more light in there. So if we use white, so here comes Brad with a white reflector. We're going to try this and let's see what a difference it makes. On the white side, right in there. All right, let me compare it with the one previously. Wow. Okay, so that actually does work pretty well. It didn't really add too much trouble. Put it back in there again. It didn't add too much. I was afraid it might add too much light, but actually it looks pretty good. Now you don't have to worry about looking up so much because the light's going to be reflected from what he did there. Yeah, actually, you know what? Second thought, bring in your Brad with a white reflector. Let's flip it over to silver, see what silver does. Actually, the white looked fine. I think I'd stick with the white. But again, these are the kind of things you're going to try on your own. You're going to flip it over. What's it cost for an extra frame of digital? $0. That's what's great about it. And you get instant feedback right here on the back of the camera. All right, now we're going to set up for something completely different. We're in the same studio, but what we've done is we're going to set up for a very masculine shot, very masculine looking portrait, very dark, just a little bit of light. Really, really nice for anytime you want to do a male portrait, you want something really, really striking. So we're going to do it on a black background. So we're on the same wall here in the studio, the white wall. What we did was we used a pop-up background. So this is just a little pop-up background. It folds down to about this. And when you open the zippered case, it comes a little blue zippered case. You open it, it goes floop, and it makes this giant thing. Lastalight makes them, Westcott makes them, a ton of different companies make these pop-up backgrounds. They're very inexpensive. What's nice about them is one side's white and one side's black. Now you can get them in all kinds of, you can get one side green, one side blue, you can get them in all kinds of different ones. The one I think you'll find the most useful is white on one side, black on the other. They come with a very small little stand to pop it up, which is what we have in the background. Now, we're going to have to deal with a problem in this studio because everything in this studio is white that you're probably not going to have to deal with when you do this yourself. And that is that the light, if it hits something white, it reflects. That's why you'll see reflectors are either white or silver, because you want the light to reflect. Well, the problem here is the light in this room, everything is white. The drapes are white, the ground's white, the floor's white, everything. So we just took this big flat right here. It's a big black wall, for lack of a better term. You can buy these. You can buy these at sign shops, and they sell them. They're about $40 a sheet, and you'll hear them referred to in the lighting trade as V-flats. Because what you do is you'll buy one big 8-foot by 4-foot panel, another 8-foot by 4-foot, and then you'll tape it together with gaffer's tape, with black gaffer's tape in the middle, and it makes this giant V. The reason why we're putting it in here, and you probably won't even have to do this, is because everything's white and light's going to bounce everywhere. That's not good in a lighting situation where we want just a little bit of light falling on our subject. So I'm going to bring Mark in again. So Mark, come on in here. We're going to have you sit right here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to have Mark kind of look over here as if as if I'm shooting from this camera position, but you can see where I'm actually going to be shooting for. So he's not actually going to be looking at the camera, and I probably will have him do a couple of shots where he is looking at the camera, but I'm still going to keep his body position faced over this way, and he's going to kind of look over here. And by the way, anytime that you're posing a model and you're going to have them look someplace else, like a 2/3 view or something like that, actually give them a place to look at so they don't just kind of look like they're looking off into nowhere. It really helps. Another key thing that you want to do is you want to make sure that you don't see too much of the whites of their eyes. So you don't want Mark looking so far over this way that you don't really see his iris, and what you see instead is just a big whites of his eyes. So give him a spot to look at every single time, and then also make sure that from your position, from the camera position, you don't see too much whites of the eyes. This is something I'm dealing with a lot on these sets, is making sure there's not too much whites, because it's very, very distracting. You really want to see that iris nice and crisp. All right, so Mark, let's kind of look like right over in this area. We're going to use this light to light him with. So we're using another spider light. I just wanted you to see what the inside of him look like. There's the 4 bulbs. I'm not going to turn them on while the video camera's on, because it just gets very, very, very bright. But that's what it looks like inside, and then we're just going to use this little Velcro here to put this right back on the top of it. It just Velcros right on, kind of seals up, keeps the light from spilling out all the way around like that. And that's all there is to it. Now, the placement of this light is what this technique is all about. Now, where are you using spider lights? You can use strobes. It makes absolutely no difference. Doesn't matter what your light source is, whether you're using continuous light like we're using here, or a strobe, the light placement and everything else is going to be the same. All I'm going to do is I'm going to take the light here, and I don't want to actually aim it directly at him here. I kind of want to aim it to where it's just kind of skimming him a little bit this way. So I'm almost going to kind of aim the light straight. And what I want is, I want this side of his face really well lit. And then I want to have it kind of fall off, and it should be very, very dark and shadowy on this side of his face over here. So lots of dark shadows and stuff over here. If there's a little bit of light, it's okay. And so that's what this technique is really all going to be about, is trying to make sure that there is a little bit of light so you can see here. I don't really want to put a reflector in here. I really just want to be able to turn this light back and forth a little bit to where I get just a little bit of light there. All right? So what you can do is, we're going to shoot in aperture priority mode. We're going to start at f4. And it would be nice if I turned the light on. I found that lights make a big, big difference when they're on. I found that when they're off, it gets kind of dark. All right, there we go. So what's nice about these, these direct on lights are they're always on. You can see what we're getting right here. So you can actually spend a little time. Look, you can see right now. How much different is what the camera is going to see than what you're going to see? Well, what you see is what you get with instant lights, and that's why it's nice to use them for this video so you can really see what's going on. All right, so keep looking where you are, Mark. I'm going to kind of give you get a head and shoulders kind of look. Now, where do I focus on Mark? I want to put the little sensor in the middle of my camera. I want to move it to where it is right over his eyes. The most critical thing to be in focus in one of these portraits, especially when I'm at f4. So f4 has a very shallow depth of field. It's very possible at f4 that Mark's nose will be in focus, but the back of his head will be out of focus. So one thing I don't want to focus on is his nose, because he'll have a nice crisp nose and his eye will be a tiny bit out of focus. So you want to make sure you nail that little red spot on the center of your camera. Make sure that you nail it right on his eyes. That's why I'll move the sensor around using this little circle here to make sure that the spot is over his eyes. So let me go ahead and do that right now. I'm going to move it to where the spot is directly on his eyes. All right, Mark, I'm seeing just a hair too much of the iris, so if you can look a little, just move your eyes, not your head or anything, but I'm going to have you look a little more over here. Perfect. All right, and let's take a test shot and see how that looks. Ooh, very nice. So I'm not having to deal a whole lot with the lighting and stuff, because what you see is what you get. But I can tell you what, if you look on the back of the camera, I'm blowing out his head a little bit, and that is a critical area you cannot let blow out. I'm blowing out his skin on the other side. So the only thing I can do here, I can move the light further away, which I don't really want to do. I can adjust the exposure compensation. So let's try that. I'm going to drop the exposure down a little bit, and let's see where we're at. Whoops, the camera didn't focus here. Actually, that's kind of important too. There, right back on the eye. And boom, it's gone. All it took was moving it a third of a stop from where we're at, And let's take another couple of test shots here. That looks really nice. Look at that nice look. This is great. Now, I really wouldn't want to shoot this so much for a female portrait. It's just a little bit too much of a masculine lighting look, but it looks great for this kind of stuff. Let me take a couple more shots while I've got you here, Mark, because this looks pretty darn good. Just like that. And make sure I really nail the focus point right on your eye. Looking good. Lots of shadows on the other side of the face. Now, if I wanted to open it up a little bit, what I could do is I'm going to just take the light and feather it a little bit more towards him. Now, this is going to wrap around his face a little bit more. Let's see what that does. Just by moving a little bit more, and it should light the other side of his face just a little bit more. Let's see how that did. Actually, it changed the lighting on his neck a little bit. So I'm actually going to bring the light around a little bit. I'm actually going to bring it a little more this way. And if I want it to wrap too, I can get a little closer with it. I can see from where I'm standing right now the light on the other side of his face. So now we're really opening things up quite a bit. And again, I can look at it, ooh, I can see even better from this position here. Mark, I'm going to bring this, you don't have to move, but I'm going to bring this around a little bit more to where it's like right beside you. And that's going to light it quite a bit better. You can actually see his other eye is lit now. And there's actually starting to come around. Let's wrap it a little bit more. There we go. And take one more shot. And this is a variation. You have to decide if you want more light spilling on or less. But again, very, very easy. One light setup, don't need a reflector or anything. The only thing that we needed in this case that would be unusual is this big black flat. By the way, one thing I didn't mention about the black flats is that they're usually white, black on one side and white on the other. So that's also handy if you want to use, for when I'm doing fashion, I'll flip it around to the white side and use that instead, because then it becomes a full-length, full-body reflector. Well, although we're doing a lot of studio stuff today, of course, in the book, I talked about how to shoot beautiful landscapes, and there's a couple of key things that you need to know, camera gear-wise and otherwise, to get those kind of landscapes, because there is a recipe for landscape photography, and there's a couple of different things to consider. Number one, great landscape photography happens twice a day, at around dawn and around dusk. Get there before dawn. Get completely set up, because some of the most beautiful light's going to happen before the sun actually comes up. Once the sun comes up, once you have sunrise in the morning, the quality of light starts going dramatically down. Once the sky's up, once 15 minutes, 20 minutes past sunrise, the light gets bad. And this is absolutely critical. If I could sit down with some afterwards, and they put their gear up and they go to breakfast. So that's number one. Number two is go about a half hour before dusk and shoot. Don't just shoot right to dusk and pack it up. Wait another 15 to 20 minutes, because there's still some gorgeous light. In fact, you can almost sometimes wait a half hour after dusk and get absolutely beautiful light. Those are the two times where landscapes look beautiful. Now, can you get a beautiful landscape at 3 o'clock in the afternoon? You can get a pretty decent one, you can get an okay one, but every time I see one at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I don't care how pretty it is, all you can think to yourself is, man, you know how good that would have looked if they'd have been there at dawn, if they'd have been there at dusk, because that's where the great light is. So that's absolutely critical. Now, if you're going to follow that basic logic that you've got to be there then you're going to have to make some things that you're going to have to do in the camera to make this work. Number one is you absolutely, positively have to shoot on a tripod. All right, you absolutely positively have to have a tripod. This is the one I use. It's the Gitzo Mountaineer. It's a very, very heavy-duty tripod with a ball head. Why do you need a heavy-duty tripod? Well, number one, it does more than just hold your camera steady. It holds it incredibly steady. It has to, because you're going to be outside it's not just going to hold your camera steady, it's going to keep it from falling over in high winds. And you're going to be shooting a lot of times in outdoors in less than ideal situations. And when it comes to these, do you really need these big heavy legs and all? Absolutely. You know, my friend Bill Fortney, who's a world famous landscape photographer, he really said it best. He said there's two kinds of tripods, ones that are light and convenient to carry around, and then there's good ones. You got to have a good one. Number two is, to make your life easier, you got to get a ball head. You don't have to get the brand that I have, you don't have to get the one that I have, but you have to get a ball head. What a ball head's going to do is make your life so much easier in the field. You're just going to release one button, it's going to move you around. Now, I have a quick release bracket that I use that makes life easier too. That's not absolutely necessary, but I'm going to mount my camera here on the quick release bracket, lock it down. I always give it a little tug to make sure it's locked down. Then anytime I want to change my view for my landscape, I'm just going to turn one knob and flip it around and I'm ready to go. All right, so having a ball head, it'll just make your life so much. When I see people using pistol grips or these things, oh, with the bars, oh, it's so painful. When someone switches to a ball head, it is a one-way trip. You will never switch back because they are just incredible. Not just for landscapes, but specifically for any type of shooting you're doing, they're just fantastic. Now, that being said, what kind of lens do we use? I recommend using a wide angle lens. The widest angle lens you can get before it becomes a fisheye. So a 12 to 24, in this case a 14 to 24, because I'm on a full frame camera that's very wide. And this is a very important thing about full frame cameras. One of the biggest advantages of full frame is for people who shoot landscapes, because a full frame camera will get you a wider view with the same kind of lens. So 14 millimeters put on a Nikon D300, for example, is not going to get you nearly as wide angle a shot as a 14 millimeter camera on a full frame camera. So if you're a landscape photographer, full frame cameras do offer you a very big advantage. Besides all the other advantages, one of the big advantages is it lets you get wider, and they're just really fantastic when you're doing landscapes. All right, a couple other tools you need. What your concerns are, because you're always going to be shooting in low light, either at dawn or at dusk. It's going to be you do not want to touch the camera. So you're going to need some kind of a cable release. Now, the cable release allows you to fire the camera without touching or creating any vibration here, and that's exactly what you want. There's a little place on the front where you just pop this open, it's the second one down, and it screws right in. Now, you can buy wireless remotes too. You don't have to have one that actually is wired to the camera. In fact, some of the less expensive cameras have less expensive remotes you can buy very inexpensively and just do the whole thing wirelessly. But that's what you're going to do. You're going to use this to fire your camera. You want to step away and not touch this in any way. And that way you're ready to go. Now, what happens if you don't have a cable release? Because I often find myself on a landscape shoot without a cable release because I forgot to put it in my bag or whatever. So there is another kind of workaround. What you can do is set your camera to self-timer mode. Now, you'll hear some people argue this point back and forth. How long do you have to leave the self-timer on? The default on most cameras is 10 seconds. It's going to go for 10 seconds and then take the shot. Some people say you can lower it to 5 seconds safely, and at that point there's no camera shake. I just have mine to 2 seconds. Do you know why? I just don't have the patience to wait 5 seconds. So you think 5 seconds? When you try to go 5 seconds between shots, it just seems like a lifetime. So I have mine go beep, beep, and then fire. So I'll just go ahead and put it on this mode, and we'll go ahead and get a shot of Adam here. Beeps for a couple of seconds. Feels like a lot longer than 10 seconds, doesn't it? That's why I go to the menu and switch mine to 2 seconds. There's actually a thing on the back where you have timers. I'm going to go and set my timer, self-timer, to 2 seconds. Watch the difference. Much better. All right, these are the tools that you need. This is all that you need to make great landscape photos. What's more important is what time you get there versus the quality of your lens, the quality of your camera, or everything else, because the quality of light is what makes great landscape photography. I'm also going to tell you something that you don't hear a lot of people talk about, and that is there is a very key component of landscape photography, and that is luck. If you happen to get there on a morning where there's beautiful cloud cover and the sun comes up and there's all these beautiful, fabulous clouds to catch the color, you're going to have an incredible sunrise. If you get there on that morning and there's not a single cloud in the sky, the sun is just going to come up. So there is a bit of luck involved. So how can you make luck on your side? Go to that location more than once. Because if you just go there once, it's a total roll of the dice whether you're going to have a fabulous sunrise or just the sun's going to come up on an empty sky. So increase your chances to have a lucky morning. Go again and again and again. If you found that special place, that beautiful mountain, the lake with the glassy water, how do you get glassy water? You happen to be there on a day where there's no wind. How do you do that? You go again and again and again. So when you open up a landscape calendar and you see these incredible shots, understand that these people have dedicated their lives to this. They may have gone to that location 25 times to be there that one morning where it had incredible clouds, it had glassy water and the whole 9 yards. But you can be sure that when they were there, they were on a sturdy tripod. They had a great ball head. They used a camera release. They had a wide angle lens. They made sure they didn't introduce anything that would ruin the quality of that shot. But the key thing is if you're not there when the light's great, you're not going to get a shot with great light. All right, whole new lighting look for you. We're on the other end of the studio. We've closed the drapes so we don't have a bunch of ambient light coming in, and we're going to be shooting on a white wall. What we're going to shoot this time is a very, very, very popular look that was expensive to achieve, but now it's very inexpensive to achieve because of a little accessory that we're going to use. We're going to use a ring flash adapter. So the characteristics of this are, you see this all the time on the cover of fashion magazines. It is actually a circle of light that actually attaches right onto your camera. So your lens shoots through this circle, and it creates circular catch lights in the eyes, which are kind of nice. But it has a very, very flat look to it. I want to tell you this about ring flash. You're either going to love it or you're going to hate it. There's no in between. Because a lot of times when we're working in the studio, we want to keep our subject away from the background. So I like to keep them ideally about 10 feet away from the background behind me, actually a little further than I am from the background right now. That's ideally what I would like. However, that being said, in this case, when you're shooting a ring flash, you want your subject very, very close to the background because it casts almost a glow of a shadow back behind them. And this is one of those rare cases where you want to see the shadow. It's part of the ring flash look. And again, you may go, oh, I love that look, or oh, I can't stand that look. I haven't found a lot of people that are kind of in between, but I'm going to show you how you do it because it's a great thing to add to your arsenal. First thing you need is some kind of an off-camera flash. Doesn't matter whether you're using Nikon or whether you're using Canon. They make an adapter for both. We're using a Nikon SB800, so it's a little bit of an older flash, but it still works well. And what you're going to do is, here's the thing that we're talking about. It's called the ray flash. Now, you can actually buy the more expensive version, buy the whole thing. You can actually buy a dedicated ring flash. So if you're going to be doing this all the time, if this is going to become your staple, then you'll actually want to buy a strobe with it built on. But what we're going to do to save money and time and weight is this. What this thing does is it actually attaches to the front. It kind of snaps onto the front, and you can a little lock on the top here. Locks it onto your camera. So your lens comes right through here. So this attaches to the front of your camera. And by the way, this is one of the only times ever that I hope you're going to shoot with a flash directly on top of your camera. That is usually the most flattering, harsh light. In this case, what's going to happen is the light that comes out of the strobe comes down here, gets distributed through here. It's still kind of harsh and bright and really, really punchy, but that's okay. It's a particular look you're going for. Then what you do is you take this and you attach this onto the camera. So we're going to slide the lens through the center and then attach the flash to the hot shoe on the top of the camera like this and lock it on. All right. Now, when we're shooting with strobes or shooting with a flash, I'll switch to manual mode. All the rest of the time, I shoot in aperture priority mode. It's probably the most popular mode used by professionals. But when it comes to strobes, you need to switch to manual mode because you need to be able to have control of the shutter speed and the aperture separately. Now, we're going to start off in the area of 160th of a second. The fastest you can go with a strobe like this, an off-camera strobe, is 1/250th of a second. So just start off under 1/250th, or your camera won't properly sync with the strobe itself. So you want to make sure that you start at least 1/250th of a second or less. A good safe starting place every time I'm setting up a strobe is I start at 1/125th of a second. That's kind of just a good starting place at f5.6. So let's go ahead and take a test shot. We're going to bring Shay in. We're going to put her very close to the background. And at that point, what I'm going to do is I'm using a shorter lens here. We're using like a 24-70. Hi, Shay. If you'll, so let me have you position over here kind of close to the wall. Now see, look how close she is to the wall. And this is closer than you would normally get. You really would want her quite a bit off there. But she's casting a soft shadow back here now just from the ambient light in the room. We don't really want that. We want that hard, weird glow that is created by using one of these. And we're going to take just a couple of test shots and see how we go. So I'm going to be closer to the model than I usually am. Now, I like to leave a little bit of space between me and my subject generally because it just makes them feel more comfortable. When you have someone that's like right in your face shooting you, it is kind of intimidating. You have a camera like right there. So I like to put that little bit of space between myself and the subject. But in this case, the whole idea behind this thing is to get in tight. We'll take some tight and some out a little bit far. So that's the whole setup. You put your strobe on here. Set your camera to manual. Start at like 1/125th of a second at 5.6, just as a starting place. Take a test shot and see how it looks. You're going to attach this over the top of the strobe. Let's take a couple of test shots and see where we're at. All right, I'm going to have a little hand movement from you here. There you go. Very good. Okay, well, we need a little bit of adjustment. So I'm going to move to, I'm going to put it at 160th of a second, and we'll go to f6.3, and let's just see how this looks here. All right, very good. Wow, you can really see the shadow, the little kind of glow coming up between her. One good way to do it with this is go ahead and start by getting an exposure without the ray flash on there. Go ahead and get an exposure, and you want it a little darker than the ambient room light. So take the flash off, take a test shot, see what it looks like, get it a little darker than normal, then we're going to switch, add the strobe light, and it'll kind of fill in the rest. All right, stop giggling, everybody. Everybody here on the set is like cracking up. Stop cracking up. Here we go. All right, there we go. That is like, I just woke up in the morning, I'm tired. There we go. I'm also doing one other thing that really has nothing to do with the technique. Just, I'm turning the camera just a little bit this way or this way. For this type of shot, I think it adds a little bit of energy, but it's just a stylistic thing. You either like tilty shots or you don't. It's kind of like the ray flash itself. All right, let's take a couple of more shots here. Get in a little bit closer and a little bit closer. You see, this is closer than I normally like to be. Oh, that looks good. Very good. Very nice. And wow, these look good. Okay, and you're going to see on screen here, you're going to see that little glow that's behind her, and that's the trademark look of this. Again, it's a very, very bright, flat look, so you have to decide if this is for you, but this is the most inexpensive way to get to that part. All right, one of the techniques we talked about a couple times in the book, different techniques about doing panos, but I have learned a technique since the book that is fantastic and makes a huge difference in the way the panos stitch together later in Photoshop. It makes it so easy. Here's one of the problems, and I'll tell you what the solution is. The problem is, let me set this down. The problem is that when you stitch your pano together in Photoshop, they always kind of came out like a bow tie. They were kind of big at one end, and they got small and they got big at the other end, and of course you'd have to crop it and you'd take the middle and you get your pano. Well, the technique I'm going to show you for shooting your pano is going to allow you to have to crop, have less of that bow tie effect and keep more of the image. And all it takes is just a simple shift while you're shooting. Now, first some camera techniques. Back before Photoshop CS3, and it's even better in CS4, but back before then, I used to have to show you 7 steps to do in your camera to get a successful pano to stitch together in Photoshop. 7 steps. Now, there's just one. You can shoot in aperture priority mode, no problem. You don't have to change anything else in your camera. Only one thing you really have to do, and that is make sure you overlap your segments by 20%. That's it. overlap your segments by 20%. Which means if I start to shoot a pano here, I'm going to shoot and make sure that the next segment I've overlapped a bit, and next segment I've overlapped a bit, and next segment I've overlapped, and I've overlapped and overlapped as I go around, okay? So that's the whole technique, but here is the foot technique that makes all the difference in the world. The deal is this: when you go to shoot your pano, you're going to start your first frame. You're going to go click, click here. I'm going to just shift to manual so it will just fire no matter what. So you're going to go click, 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 click. Reseat your feet. Click, 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 click. Reset your feet. Click, 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 and kind of reseat them again as you come around. That little shift in your feet, just moving your body that little bit, click, 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 makes all the difference in the world on how the whole thing stitches together later in Photoshop. It's just the little stuff that makes the big difference. So what you're going to do is 20% overlap. Also, I like to shoot, especially if I'm shooting like a mountain range or a cityscape or stuff, I like to shoot vertically. There's two advantages. Number one is there's less distortion to the images. Because you're shooting up tall, there's less that's going to kind of spread out on the ends. Number two is you're going to have more, if you do have to crop it, you're not going to crop off the top of the buildings or the top of the mountains or things like that. Also, just as a tip, don't shoot with a wide angle lens for your panos. It's going to make your panos that much tougher to do. You're going to have distortion on the edges. So shoot it like 70 millimeter, 80 millimeter, something in that range, so it's a little further out. And you can even shoot with a 50 millimeter, but I wouldn't do anything like 35 or 14 or 24 or anything like that. Go a little bit longer on the lens range. Those couple of tips, and you'll have great looking panos when you stitch them together in Photoshop. Alrighty, this is just a tip that I think is going to help you with understanding how the light can be used in portraiture. So let's take a look at Mark here. Hey, Mark. Mark's still here. He's been here for 7 days. Okay, so Mark, we're going to light him and do just a very simple one light thing. But the thing is, when you shoot a portrait of somebody, the focus really should be on Mark's face. Unless you're literally selling a clothing line, and if you're doing something for a catalog where the clothes are really what the star of the show is, then you want to light everything evenly. But in this case, Mark's face is the star of the show, which is, by the way, why we hired you. Anyway, so we want to make sure that his face is lit the most, and then it falls off as it goes down. Number one is the human eye is going to look at the brightest thing in the photo. So you want the brightest thing in the photo to be his face. You want the light to really fall here. Well, there's a couple of things that you can do. One of them to get the light to fall off is to use a smaller softbox like this and get it up nice and high. So the light kind of goes here, and it's naturally going to have a fall off as it goes down. That's one of the downsides of using a huge softbox. So if you do use a huge softbox, you need to get it up a little bit higher so it does have a little bit of fall off. So I'm going to go ahead and take a test shot of Mark. There's going to be some natural fall off, but then I'm going to show you a way to use a flag to get even, enhance the fall off effect. So let me go ahead and take a shot here, Mark. Let me just get back just a little bit more, and there we go. And let's take a look at the shot. Well, kind of here's the problem. It does fall off, but I would say the difference between the light on Mark's face and the light on Mark's arm is probably maybe a half a stop. It's not a lot. His arm is really, really bright, and I don't really want you looking down there. I really want you looking at his face. So what we're going to do is we're going to swing a flag into here just real quick, and what we're going to do is we're going to kind of cut off the bottom of the softbox with this flag. Just like that. So we're kind of blocking this. So all now what you're going to have is the light kind of from the top, and there's not much light coming out here. We're forcing the light to fall off a little quicker than normal. All right, so let's go ahead and do that. Let's take the same shot. Here we go. Might be a little back further there. There we go. Take approximately the same shot. Take a couple here. And you can see, if you look at the difference in fall off, you can really see it in his shirt and in his arm between the two shots. It goes from his arm is really well lit to his arm's actually a little bit darkened and shadows a little bit. It's still, you can still see some of the light because we're blowing a big flash on him, but it really drops off, and that's what you're looking for. You want the light to be the most focused here and dropping off gradually as we go down. Just a quick tip to keep in mind as you're shooting portraits, to focus the eye where you want it by making sure the brightest thing in the photo is what you want them to look at. All right, another lighting setup. Starting off with a black background, we're going to go for a dramatic look, but this one is for female lighting. So we're lighting women. We want to use a nice big softbox. This is a 39-inch by 39-inch size. So just, it has to be a big softbox. You're not married to the 39 part of it. Just the fact that it's big is what you're looking for. Of course, the bigger the softbox, the more softer in wrapping the light. So I'm going to have the subject stand about here. Softbox is going to be here. Now, there's a technique called feathering the light that adds extra softness. If you put the subject where the center of the light is going to be directly on them, that's going to be harsher. As you get to these edges, it gets softer. So it's very, very common when you're trying to get the softest, most beautiful light, especially for women, children, babies, things like that, is that you will actually turn this thing to where you're just catching the edge of the lighting. It's called feathering, and it works really, really great. So actually, it looks like the light is actually passing in front of your subject sometimes. But of course, you got to realize it's coming out in a big flash. You're going to lose a little bit of power, right? So because it's not going to be as powerful back here as it's going to be in the center of the light, there's always a fall off from here to here. But in this case, it's very, very popular, especially in portrait photography, glamour photography, things like that. You're going to want to be on this edge instead of the center. In this case, I'm going to have the subject stand about right here, and I'm going to kind of feather this back just a little bit so it's not really kind of almost blowing past her, and she's kind of getting the edge here, so it's going to be very, very nice and soft and flattering. Now, 45 degrees, the opposite of this, coming straight back here, is another strobe. And I'm using what's called a strip bank, so it's a very tall, thin, it's like 1 foot wide by 3 feet deep. Now they make these in all different sizes, of course. You can get the 1 foot by 3 foot, or you can get a really, really long one. And what these do is, just think about it. The box is tall and skinny, so how's the light going to come out of it? Taller and skinnier than it normally would be. So I really kind of like this. This makes a great hair light. Now if you want to put it straight over your subject, right over their head on a boom stand, it makes a standard, traditional kind of great hair light. What I like about here is I'm using this kind of as a hair light. It's going to light the back side of her hair, so it does a nice job that way. But also, this also kind of lights the arms and everything else. It does a really, really nice job with it. Now, what you can do is, anytime you're using more than one strobe, you can just build this in segments. So in a moment, I'm going to bring Shay back out, and we're going to put her here. I can start with just the backlight and just see just what the backlight looks like. Then I can add the front light. You can build it in stages. So what we really want to get out of this look is, I'm going to have her actually kind of turn and play towards this light. So what am I looking for in this particular look is, I want light kind of here. I want it to kind of fall off to shadows over here. Then I want this light to kind of pick up and light back here. So there kind of almost should be a little bit of a gap in lighting right over here, right? This side of the face is well lit, it goes dark, and then it's lit back here. You've seen this kind of look before. It's kind of a very dramatic look, but it's also a very nice look. This works for men and women, but in this case, I'm really trying to go for the softness, which is why we're feathering the softbox and using such a large softbox. So let me go ahead and bring Shay onto the set, and we're going to start off. I'm going to go ahead and turn off the front light. I'm going to turn on the back light. We're just going to work on the hair. So Shay, if you'll stand right there for me, thank you. Let me go ahead and turn off this front light. Alrighty, and so now we're just going to work on the strip light in the back, and I'm going to grab my camera. Let's look at the settings. The settings are very surprising. 125th of a second for the shutter speed, and we're like at 7.1 for the aperture. Now we can go up again as high as f11 or something like that, but at 7.1 things are going to be pretty in focus, so I'm not too worried about it. So Shay, this is only going to be the backlight, but I'm going to have you kind of look where you would normally look. So if you'd kind of look a little bit over this way, but again I want you to be really careful about not letting me see too much of the whites of the eyes. So let's go ahead and just take a first shot here and look at the backlight. All right, well you can take a look at this shot here and you can see how you don't really see the front of her is lit at all. It just lights kind of a rim light on one side of her. You can also see another big problem in this shot right here, and it's the lens flare. You can actually see that. So I'm going to have David grab a flag and bring one in, because that's going to create a problem. Now I'm not going to create the tunnel this time because I only have one light, so I'm just going to kind of have David push it back a little further. So mostly I don't see that light. That's pretty good. Right there. Let me take a test shot again, and let's try that. Boom, lens flare's gone. That's how easy it is to fix it, is just getting something between you and that light. So what I'm doing is I'm just making sure that I don't really see too much of that. Now, from where I'm standing right here, I actually can see about this much of it, but it doesn't cause a problem. I really want to capture the big of it, the bigness of the light, capture most of it with that flag, which it did. All right, now we can go and turn on the second light. Let me go ahead and do that. We'll just flick this baby on. And let's try this. And let's take a test shot here, kind of playing to the same spot. Very nice. Now, on looking at this, it just looks like the front light, the main light, is a little bit too much. And I'm also picking up some lens flare again. So the light didn't move, but I must have shot from a slightly different angle, because let me just move over a little bit. Yeah, I think I did. Let me just put myself in the right spot. And the lens flare is gone. Do you see how much difference that was? And the lens flare came back. I shot over here, I had the lens flare. I shoot right here, and the lens flare is gone. And that's because I positioned the flag while I was standing here, but I didn't come back to the same spot. All right, so let me just, I'm going to lower the power of this strobe. So that one is on group 1. Let me make sure that's correct. Okay, so each time I press this, so I'm going to have Adam swing around here and take a look at this. Each time I press the down button, you'll actually see the power of the strobe drop. So that's me on the camera just dropping it. So if I want to raise it or lower it, I can do it right from the camera position. All right, so we're going to take this down to 1.5, so that's just about as low as this one will go. And then I'm going to retry the shot. This way I think I'm going to have a little bit lower, and it's not going to be quite so bright in the front, a little bit more dramatic. Wow, what a difference. That was it. That's what I needed to do that. And if you look at the shot here, you can see it does go from being lit in the front, and it's nice, soft wrapping light. Her eyes look great. The position of her eyes is dead on the money. Let me shoot that one again real quickly. We've got a really nice shot here, Shay. So if I'm just going to have you kind of work to that light. Very nice, good. And I keep recomposing, so I'm not moving my spot where it needs to be. Very nice. That looks great. That looks good. Very nice. All right, couple more and we'll be set here. These look very good. And good. And let's take a look. Great. No hot spots, no highlights, no nothing. We're good. Really a very, very simple setup, just using 2 lights. And so what made this kind of work are 2 things. That strip light in the back really makes it work. The softness is coming from feathering that light so it's not hitting her directly. And number 3 is the flag kept us from having issues that we're going to have to deal with later in Photoshop. Very, very simple setup. And of course, we're using that black Westcott background that lets us do this anywhere on location. We could be in the middle of a convention center, shoot the same thing, get the exact same look because we're just using a portable background. All right, the shot you saw came from the book, and it was about product shots, and we've got a really great trick for doing product shots. First, let's talk about the setup we're going to do. As soon as I start to think of doing a product shot, I immediately start to think about using spider lights because they're instant on. It's so much easier to get your product shot set up using these because the lights, it's what you see is what you get. So I use these. Now here's what we did for a very, very simple product table. We actually just stuck a little coffee table under here. A white roll of seamless paper. I think it's like 5 feet wide, so very inexpensive. The whole setup for this part here is 3 pieces of gaffer tape along a brick wall, a little piece of white seamless paper, that's it. But what you really want to do, and the whole trick to this is to making this look more professional, is you got to buy one extra little thing. And it can be very inexpensive or it can be 20, 30 bucks, but that's still pretty inexpensive. It's this thing right over here. A sheet of plexiglass right here. That's all you need. It's a big sheet of plexiglass about this big. Now, you can actually go to your local home improvement store and they sell plexiglass by the sheet. So this is where we got this one, was just the local home improvement store, the Home Depot, Lowe's kind of thing. However, outside of this, you can actually buy a cheap picture frame. If you don't need one this big, you can buy a cheap picture frame. You know how you go to to the store and they have these picture frames and you can tell that it's plexiglass and not real glass, in that case, you can just use a big sheet from there, take it out. But we went, spent just a couple extra dollars, still very inexpensive, to get this. I'm going to have David come in real quick and just drop this down under our lens. And we're going to shoot that lens. And watch how easy it is to put a product shot like this together. So we put the plexiglass down. We position the lens. Now, I'm going to say something that's going to sound really obvious here, but this is going to save you a lot of time and trouble. Right now, once you get everything in place, you want to do two things. Take a cloth and clean whatever product it is you're shooting. In this case, we're just shooting a lens like we did in the book. Clean the product. It'll save you so much time later. Clean it really, really well. Use an air blower to blow any dust or anything off, because there's no sense in going and doing it manually later in Photoshop. You can spend 30 seconds now and it'll save you 30 minutes later. Number two is clean the plexiglass. Keep the plexiglass nice and clean. So you'll want to go through there with some Windex, clean off the plexiglass and keep it clean. Once you've done that, the rest is honestly very, very simple. We're using two lights here because we want a lot of light. You can just kind of move these, and as you move them, you can exactly see what it does to your shadows. So I usually put two lights that are kind of nice and close in. What I'm looking for when I'm doing product photography is I want to see highlights and shadows. So I want to see dark areas and then light areas. That's why strip banks are very popular for this too. If you're using strobes and you have a strip bank, one of those tall, thin soft boxes that's 1 foot by like 3 feet deep or 2 feet by 5 feet, those are great. If you ever see someone shoot a wine bottle and they have that long reflection going down there, that's what they're using, is strip banks. So in this case, we're just using a couple of soft boxes. What we're trying to do is minimize the shadows. I have my, because we're set down so low, because we just put this on a little coffee table, I had to put my tripod down so low. Do you want to shoot on a tripod for this stuff? Absolutely. Product shots are critical that they're really, really, really nice and crisp. So this is one of those cases where I'm going to get down on one knee and shoot with a tripod, because it makes all the difference in the world. You want your product shots to be absolutely perfectly crisp. All right, shooting in aperture priority mode, no problem there. We're set at, in this case, it's about a 60th of a second at f4.5. If you want to minimize your camera shake, of course, you can just use a little remote, but in this case, I'm just going to use, just going to shoot it with my my regular shutter. Let me just back off a little bit and see how that creates a great reflection. See that plexiglass? This is where the plexiglass makes its money, right there. I used the self-timer so it didn't create any camera shake, but I won't put you through that too much longer here. Let's just take a couple of more shots, zoom in a little bit more. You can really see that perfect reflection, and that's the trick. So it's very, very easy to do these, and you're picking up the reflection that you could create later in Photoshop. You're doing it right here. Just, if you don't use the spider lights, there's no problem. You could use two strobes for here. I would kind of position them in the same way. If you want to, you can also do a 45-degree angle. You could put one main light here, and then in the back corner, put the strobe coming in this way, but then you're going to have to worry about having light spill back into here. So that's why this particular setup, or I want to show you a variation on this. The variation on this would be literally to just put the lights on either side, just like this, on both sides of the product. Here's one. Here's the other. Is a nice variation on that. Gives you nice highlights all the way around. Let me turn this in just a hair. See that nice highlight it creates across the top? Just like that. And I'm just going to take another shot. It's already in position, so I can just kind of step back and take a look. And we'll compare the two. And you can see how the highlight moved. Kind of creates a highlight a little bit higher up. But that's one of the nice things about all this. Also, very popular with product photography is a white bounce card. It's actually, you're going to go buy, and you'll get this at like a at an office supply store, just a white piece of cardboard. It's either, you can call it, same thing you'd mounting board, foam core board in the background, and you're just going to hold it up and put it right beside there. So if you only have one light, you'll position one light here and a piece of foam core right there to reflect that light right back into that. Very, very simple setup, but very, very effective for product photography.